So the Endorphin series from Saucony includes the very well-known Endorphin Speed and Endorphin Pro, but I'd say one of the lesser known shoes in the collection is the Endorphin Shift. This is going to be a more stable up-tempo trainer compared to those other two shoes. I've done a few runs now in the Endorphin Shift 2, and I'm ready to give you my first impressions. So let's start with the specs. This shoe has a stack height of 39mm in the heel, 35 in the forefoot, and a 4mm heel-to-toe drop. The weight comes in at 10.1 ounces, and I put the shoe in the high cushion trainer category. So talking about the fit of the shoe, I received my typical men's size 12, which is what I am in the Endorphin Pro and the Endorphin Speed, and it fit all right. However, I thought it was a tiny bit short and a tiny bit wide, which I have longer, more narrow feet, so it wasn't the best fit in my opinion, but I didn't feel cramped and wasn't rubbing or anything. But if you do have a wider, shorter foot, it might work better for you, or you might need to play around with sizing depending on your foot. So it's maybe true to size. Besides that though, I had no issues with the lockdown, and this new upper was super comfortable. Speaking of this upper, let's talk about what's new in the shoe overview. So like I mentioned, the upper gets tweaks from V1. It's even more seamless and has an interesting hybrid of almost a nylon material and a dual layer mesh. The heel counter gets tweaked a tiny bit so that it's more comfortable around the ankle, but it still locks you in and adds some extra support. The midsole is the same as V1. It is a thick stack of their EVA Power Run foam, and a very firm foam at that. It does have a thin layer of TPU Power Run Plus underneath the sock liner, but it doesn't really add too much to the overall feel of the midsole. Like the other Endorphin shoes, it uses the speed roll geometry to help move you through your gait cycle. The outsole remains the same as V1 as well. It has some strips of XT900 rubber that also creeps up into the midsole on the medial side just to give a little extra support. Alright, now let's talk about the ride of this shoe and my first impressions from the few runs that I've done. And I'm not gonna lie, after really enjoying the bouncy feel of the Endorphin Speed and the Endorphin Pro, I was kind of disappointed with the ride of this shoe. It was more dead feeling and definitely a lot harsher. Those two shoes use Power Run PB, and this just uses regular EVA Power Run, and that is going to be the biggest difference and why it doesn't have that nice responsive bounce. However though, it was still a really smooth ride, and I was able to pick up the pace, and it was a little heavy, so I did notice that, but again, I think I would have preferred it if it was just a smidge softer. One thing that this shoe does do a lot better than the Endorphin Pro and the Endorphin Speed is in stability, especially on this medial side here with that extra heel counter and the rubber kind of going into the midsole plus that wide base. It is way more stable than the Endorphin Speed or the Endorphin Pro, which has kind of that softer foam where if you land further back in the heel, it can kind of be unstable. So if you need a more stable ride, definitely choose the Shift. Alright, now let's do a couple of quick comparisons. The first shoe I'm going to compare the Shift to is the ASICS GlideRide 2. So these shoes are actually pretty similar. They're both high cushioned, they both have exaggerated rockers, and they're both over 10 ounces. I think I like the GlideRide 2 more for just kind of everyday training, as it does kind of have a softer, a little bit more livelier ride. But I think that the Endorphin Shift 2 is better for picking up the pace because it's a little bit firmer and just kind of seems lighter overall. Next up, I'm going to compare the Shift 2 to the Endorphin Speed. So like I mentioned earlier, the Speed has that light and bouncy Power Run foam. It also has a nylon plate in there, and the shoe overall is just a lot lighter. And honestly, I'd pick this shoe for pretty much every day, for every type of run, over the Shift 2. That is, unless you need a really stable shoe, because like I mentioned, the Shift 2 is going to be a lot more stable and supportive for you, opposed to the more flexible, kind of unstable Power Run PB foam in the Speed. So far my first impressions of the Endorphin Shift 2 are kind of meh. It doesn't have the Power Run PB foam like the rest of the shoes in the Endorphin lineup, and I think it just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. Honestly, I think that the upcoming Tempus shoe would be a better replacement, like it should be in the Endorphin line, because it uses Power Run PB foam, and it's a stable option because it has that stable frame built into the midsole. So I'm hoping that after I put more miles on the Endorphin Shift 2, that midsole will soften up and I'll start enjoying it more. So I'll let you know in my full review. Subscribe so you don't miss that full review or any news coming on the 2020 Saucony lineup, which there is a lot of exciting things coming. And as always, keep on running.